November the 17th, 2016. Carmen, can you please call the roll?
Baker?
Here.
Hoffman?
Here.
Clapper?
Yes, here.
Throckmorton?
Here.
Okay, we have minutes to approve from September the 22nd. Any corrections? Motion?
Move approval of the minutes.
Carmen?
Second.
You second? Please call the roll.
Oh, okay. Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any other reports or resolutions and communications?
We did want to let you know that we did pass out the upcoming schedule for next year. You guys should all have a copy of that. The only main important thing to note is that we will be having a meeting in January. Due to the heavy caseload that we've experienced over the past few years, we really found it was a good idea to reinstitute that January meeting just to help keep things from getting bogged down in February and March.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So the petitions tonight, we have two. The first case is UV-31-16, Secretly Canadian Distribution, and the second case is CU-35-16, Joseph Anderson. I have to recuse myself from the first case because Spring Point Architects is the architect on the project, and I'm going to hand this over to Joe Hoffman.
Okay, so our first case is UV-31-16. Staff?
Thank you, Joe. This is a petition from Secretly Canadian for a property that they have at 1499 West Bloomfield Road. This is a 2.2 acre property that actually encompasses several different properties and spans over 2 zoning districts here. The petitioner has an existing warehouse and an office on the west side of the site. There was a building that was just recently constructed in 2013 to help supplement their offices and other uses on the site. Since then, they've continued to grow, and so they've looked to the property to the east of this to do an addition to their existing office building. So the property to the east is zoned commercial arterial. It's currently used by a landscaping business. And so the petitioners would like to construct an addition to their existing office building to allow for a new warehouse component to be added to that. So the petitioners are requesting a use variance in order to allow for the warehouse. Warehouse is not a permitted use in the commercial arterial zoning district, so the use variance is the route that they have to go through in order to allow for that use. To the south of this, you have a mix of single-family residential as well as an industrial site. To the east and north of this, you have a mix of single-family residences and some commercial, and then to the west of there, once again, you kind of have some commercial and single-family uses. So there are a mix of land uses that surround this site. And you can see here in the aerial photograph the overall site that is being petitioned tonight. The east side of this property is currently being used by a landscaping business for an outdoor storage yard. That received a use variance in 1995 to allow it to exist. So this petition would involve removing that landscaping business and that outdoor storage component from the site completely. There's currently a manufactured home on the site that would be used for offices, as well as an existing 6,000 square foot enclosed building that would also be used by the petitioner or possibly leased out to another party for another permitted use. But they have included that with this petition just to allow for that use. So shown here is the site plan for the site. The site currently has access from 2nd Street. The petitioners will be narrowing up the driveway cut on this just a little bit. The current cut exceeds the 34-foot maximum width, so they will be narrowing that driveway. You can see kind of in the brown here the existing buildings, and then on the south side of the site is the proposed new 15,000 square foot warehouse that would be connected directly to the existing office building. There is a loading door that's kind of on the north side of that building that they will utilize to access this. There will also be a loading door on the east side of the proposed new building that would allow for warehouse trucks and other delivery vehicles to get in and out of the building. There is an entrance, a pedestrian entrance on the north side of the building that has a sidewalk shown from that entrance up to the sidewalk on 2nd Street. The sidewalk system along 2nd Street is in good shape, so no additions or changes are needed to that network. However, they will be modifying where the sidewalk ramps cross the driveway in order to bring them back from 2nd Street a little bit more and increase pedestrian safety. They would also be relocating an existing bus stop that is slightly to the west of this site. Bloomington Transit has indicated they would like the bus stop a little bit further to the east in order to utilize an existing pull-off there and not be blocking traffic as much. So the petitioner has relocated the bus stop to accommodate that. As well as they will be parking or paving all of the existing parking areas, as well as adding new landscaping throughout the site. Because this property is zoned commercial arterial and the properties to the south and the east are zoned single-family residential, there is a Type 2 buffer yard that is required. That requires an additional setback for buildings as well as additional landscape plantings within that area, a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees. The petitioner will be saving a lot of the existing landscaping and then filling it in with whatever is missing in order to meet those buffer yard requirements. They've also shown a fence along the southeast portion of the site, basically surrounding a portion of the lot that has always been left alone. With previous approvals, that was actually required to be a set-aside, unused area. So the petitioners are installing an 8-foot privacy fence along there to help further buffer any of the impacts from this site. The current site currently has a lot of deliveries, a lot of outdoor vehicles, delivery, heavy equipment that generates a lot of noise and impacts. So one of the benefits with this particular petition is it relocates all of those impacts, those uses inside the building. So rather than a large outdoor storage yard where you have lots of trucks moving at all times, everything is directed inside of the building. So with this, they would also be installing new street trees along 2nd Street and bike rack adjacent to the proposed new building as well. There is a rain garden that is being proposed on the southeast corner of the building to help the petitioner meet their stormwater quality and stormwater detention requirements, and that will be planted with a rain garden mix as well to help improve the stormwater runoff from this site. Currently, all of the stormwater runoff just kind of runs off the site as a whole, so it will be directed to this centralized drainage area, and drainage will be improved with this petition as a whole. With the addition, with the new building being an addition rather than new construction, it is not subject to the architectural standards. However, we have been working with the petitioners in order to improve the architecture of the building. They've placed windows along the upper portions of the building in order to allow the building to be utilized with storage along the main floor and still having windows around the perimeter of the building to let in natural lighting. They've also shown a canopy over the door, the pedestrian door that's on the north side of the building, as well as utilize kind of a mixture of different colors to help break up some of the monotony of the building. While warehousing is not typically a desired use within the commercial arterial district, mostly because it does not provide a lot of employment, it's a very low use of a property. This particular warehouse is not just the primary use on this property. It is supplementing the existing offices and storage capabilities that exist on the site. However, due to the size, we can't really call it an accessory use. It certainly is somewhat of a primary use on the property. So the use variance is necessary in order to allow for this addition. There are several components of the growth policies plan that do give guidance to requests of this nature. One of those is utilizing an underdeveloped piece of property. This certainly is doing that by allowing for an existing building or an existing business to grow, expand their workforce. The location here along 2nd Street, which is an arterial road, a primary arterial road at that, certainly provides an appropriate location for the truck traffic and the amount of vehicles coming and going, although the petitioner does not expect a high amount of vehicles coming and going from the site on a daily basis, as compared to the existing landscaping business. So overall, the impacts from this petition in comparison to the existing use of the property certainly are going down. The petitioners have worked with staff to place as much landscaping and buffering along the property as possible to help buffer this from the single-family residences to the south and the east. And so overall, staff is recommending approval of this petition per the findings in staff's report and the 3 conditions that are listed, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Is the petitioner's representative present? Would you please step up to the podium, state your name?
Ben Swanson, one of the owners of Secretly Canadian.
Great. And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 20 minutes if you choose to use them.
Yeah, we've been in Bloomington for 20 years. We've grown from four people making zero money to 100 people, over 100 people with offices worldwide. Our primary headquarters is in Bloomington, where we employ 55 people. We've outgrown our current spot, and we'd love to stay where we are for a number of reasons. And we're just really looking, for us, it's really about finding a way to grow our business in Bloomington, and this is, what we feel is our best way to do that.
Okay, is that all you have for now?
Yep.
Great. All right, questions for the staff or for the petitioner? Jack?
Nothing here. I have none.
Okay, and I also have none. So, that means we now go to the public. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment on this petition? Seeing none, we are back to the board, unless the petitioner has any final comments you'd like to make. We are back to the board for action. Someone needs to make a motion.
I motion approval of UV 3116. I'll second.
Okay, the motion is for approval of this requested use variance. I assume that's with the conditions that are set forth in the staff report and based on the findings in the staff report. Any further comments by members of the board?
No.
Okay, Carmen, could we have a roll call?
Baker,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
The motion passes. Petition is granted. Thank you very much. And now, I believe, you want to wave Barry back from the hall? I think she can rejoin us. Okay.
You almost said a record there, Joe.
That was so stressful. Come on back, Barry. That is so stressful. I don't want to do this anymore. I want you back.
Great. Okay, so we are on to case CU-35-16, Joseph Anderson. Can we please have the staff report?
Good evening. Okay, the property for tonight's petition is located just southwest of downtown. You can see here at South Rogers Street between Dixie and Allen Streets. It's located at 1008 South Rogers Street. It's 0.9 acres, currently developed with the McDowell Baptist Church. The zoning designation is RC, Residential Core, and the GPP designation is Core Residential. It is part of the McDowell Gardens local historic district site, and you can see currently developed with the church and associated parking lot. And the surrounding uses are all single-family residential in nature. So this is an image of the McDowell Gardens local historic district. The petition request tonight is for historic adaptive reuse to allow a fitness center gym use at this location. And as I said before, this is part of the McDowell Gardens local district, which is primarily residential, but this historic church is included as well. The historic adaptive reuse request is a conditional use request to allow reuse of a historic structure with an otherwise non-permitted use. So fitness center gym is not a traditionally permitted use in RC, and allowing the historic adaptive reuse at this site would allow reuse of an existing non-residential historic building by allowing an addition on the site, and the other site improvements that would come along with an approval would be basically restriping of the existing parking lot and new landscaping. So this site plan was in your packet, and I just wanted to briefly go over kind of what they're proposing here. So you can see the two wings of the existing church. One is from 1925 and one is from the 60s. So it has already received, it has moved throughout history, that it has had the modern architecture of the time added more than once. And the request is for the area you see there that says addition. So it would be 7 feet off of the northern property line, and the building would be 10 feet from the existing church to the south, or I'm sorry, to the east. It would be connected at the basement level with kind of a walkway area, but beyond that connection, there are no other changes planned for the existing structure. So this site plan is a little bit out of scale of the property, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through that. This, what they're showing here for the landscaping, let's see if I can get the laser pointer. This area is what is planned for the end of their property, but their property extends a little bit farther than what is shown here. So I kind of tried to use the aerial to give you an idea. This would be roughly where the addition would go on the existing aerial site, and then have it scaled down a little bit here for you too. So there would still be parking in this area available, and their plan is to close off an existing entrance here to Dixie with landscaping. So they will be bringing the property up to the landscape code, and we'll work with staff to do that if this is approved. They will also include some landscaping that is not code required along the side here of the climb area of the new addition that is adjacent to residential. So they were able to have a survey done. It just wasn't done in time for your packet. So again, you can see the layout of the site and that the addition would be in this general area. So they will lose these parking spaces here, which they know of, and do some reconfiguration of this parking after closing this access. So this image is the northern facade. So this would be looking from the parking lot to see the existing entrance on the left and then the addition on the right. And this is the Rogers Street facade and the facade from the alley. So you can see that the roof pitch here is in this location as well. So this is the height of the wall along this side here. This area is in the core residential and the growth policies plan. Neighborhood serving commercial along arterial roadways is discussed as part of a goal of that section, and most importantly, core residential areas are designated for protection of existing single-family housing stock. And preservation of historic structures is another point of importance in the growth policies plan, which this proposal would be protecting the historic building. So I just wanted to put in, I know we don't probably see very many historic adaptive reuses, so the considerations tonight for the historic adaptive reuse approval are that the property is either locally designated or in process. This is a locally designated property. It is part of the McDowell District, and that the use does not diminish historic character of the site. Staff believes that it does not diminish the historic character. The buildings as they exist now will not be altered on the exterior, which is what our historic preservation laws look at, the exterior of the existing structures. The use enhances the ability to preserve, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and then basically just, again, reiterating that the property needs to be locally designated and that if certificates of appropriateness are required, that they get them. So this design that you see tonight has actually already been to the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission and received a certificate of appropriateness for the design that you have seen. I just wanted to speak briefly about the third point here, which is that the historic adaptive reuse is a way for us to encourage members of the public to protect our historic structures in maybe a little bit non-traditional ways. I mean, this is a large building, a large church that, you know, over time, its usefulness in this area has just changed, and it's not a neighborhood church necessarily that, you know, that people within a half mile are all walking to. It's a large building that needs care, and historic adaptive reuse allows for a commercial use to go in and have income generated that can be used to keep up a building that otherwise may fall into disrepair because there is, it's just a high order to maintain an old building of this type. And so that is what this petitioner is trying to do tonight. Staff recommended approval of this petition, CU 3516, with 3 conditions. Basically, that a complete site plan will be submitted and worked on. We are working on that with staff. The petitioner is working with staff, and that will have to be completed before any permits are issued. Bike parking needs to be identified, which is always a site plan consideration, and that the addition must be consistent with the certificate of appropriateness that was already received, so the number is there for reference. And I know the petitioner is here tonight if you have any questions. And I can answer any as well. Thanks.
Great. So petitioner's representative, if you want to step to the podium and state your name.
My name is Joseph Anderson, and I'm the owner of Hoosier Heights.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have 20 minutes to present your petition.
Okay. Well, I didn't know I was going to present, so I'll just say briefly, Hoosier Heights is a climbing gym whose primary location is here in Bloomington at 5100 South Rogers. I also have a location in Indianapolis and a location in Louisville, Kentucky, but Bloomington is really our home. It's where we do all of our central management and everything is here. That facility was opened in 1998, and it is it's a wonderful old school rock climbing gym, but Bloomington deserves a new school climbing gym, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to move closer to campus, closer to the core downtown. We're already very close to the B-line, and that's been a wonderful thing for us, and to stay close to the B-line is special. And I just love this building, and I think it presents a unique opportunity to do something, having lived in Bloomington for many years, what I would consider the Bloomington way, which is to take an amazing old building and preserve it, but give it a new use that is positive and has a strong community and has a strong foothold in Bloomington already. So, yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, there was one more thing I thought of. So we'll actually, in parking, we would be closing off both the access to the alley and the access to Dixie. So the only access to the parking would come from the main street of Rogers Street. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have questions for staff and petitioner. None?
I have no
Jeff?
questions.
No questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. If we denied this evening, what is the procedure for the petitioner? Like, when could they come back? Could they come back, and at what time period?
Let me just check that. Yeah, I do. Sorry, Jack, let me check those rules. It's either.
Can I ask another
Oh,
question in the
shoot.
meantime, while you
Yes.
guys look for that?
Yes,
Sorry.
one more question.
Thanks.
My concern has to do with item 9B, which is the proposed use shouldn't diminish the historic character of the property or is located within the historic district, would not diminish the character of the historic district. And I have concerns whether the design might do that. And I want to ask staff, how far into this can we go and discuss this evening? This is obviously something for a variance, but can we get into the actual design of, say, the new building and particularly materials used or design of the new building?
I am not certain about that. I'll ask Mr. Roach when he returns. I guess I would say, or my basic response would be that the plan that you see has been approved by the city's appointed historic preservation professional board as appropriate for this area in this district. So staff, when we first started meeting with the gym, we said, you have to see them first because we aren't design professionals in that we don't see things necessarily through a historic lens like that, like they do. So they almost unanimously approved this design. Whether or not, Jim, can they make comments and make recommendations, and could changes come out, like design changes of the addition from this hearing? It would, foremost, it would definitely have to go back. If Joe wanted to make changes, it would have to go back. If the petitioner, decided, oh, we don't like this material, then they would have to get, that reapproved by the BHPC because they have already signed off on what is here now.
And then we could be stuck in a tricky loop if this board wanted to require a certain change and the HPC did not. So maybe back and forth where they couldn't get their certificate of appropriateness and they could not get their conditional use approval. So like Jackie said, in cases like this, when we're dealing with historic structures and historic architecture, we typically defer to the design review of the Historic Preservation Commission.
But I think the answer I'm hearing is yes, we can discuss it, and we do have authority to make a decision based on something that has to do with historic preservation or historic character of the district, which would include the architecture or materials. It may start a bad loop, but we could do it. No, that's enough questioning for the moment. I'll have more to say in a little while.
Okay. I have a few questions of the petitioner. Could you talk a little bit about the plans for the historic building itself and how the gym is going to utilize them?
Yes. So the way that I talk about the church, I tend to talk about the old chapel and the new chapel, the new being the 60s one. The primary use for the old chapel, which also has an addition at the rear, which wasn't originally there with the chapel, but was added, I believe, around the same time they added this 60s. It's like an office structure. Essentially, we will be using the original chapel for a yoga studio, primarily the inside. So, we're going to return it essentially to the open character of the original chapel, and then we won't be using what's currently the office space. I mean, we may put some office back there for our employees, but we won't be, our plan now is not to lease it out or to do anything like that. I mean, it would only be our usage. And then the new chapel, and there's also, a basement to the old chapel that has restrooms and some meeting spaces and things like that. And we would just update those facilities and keep them as some meeting spaces. And that could be one of the areas that we use. So when I met with the neighborhood committee for McDowell, I told them that they would be more than welcome to, and I would like them to continue to have their neighborhood and community meetings at the site, because that's something they've been doing for a long time, perhaps forever, as far as I'm aware. And so luckily, we have lots of space for that to happen. It may happen in the old chapel or the new one. And then the primary use for the climbing portion that's not the new construction building will be in the new chapel, and that would be what's called bouldering, which is a type of climbing that is lower to the ground. It doesn't require ropes. You don't have to come with a partner. There's no belayer or person who holds the rope for you. It's a more community thing. It tends to draw a slightly younger demographic, more your college age, those kind of folks. And basically that would be on the main floor of the chapel, so it would be in the main sanctuary area. And then underneath that, on the basement level, we'll have party rooms for birthday parties and events and, Boy Scout troops and all that kind of stuff that we bring in. And then our main restrooms and things will also be on that floor. Yeah. Does that answer the question? And then the new addition will be purely roped climbing, so that's why it needs to be so tall.
Height. Okay. And the height that you're proposing is slightly lower than the 1960s addition. Yes. How does it compare to the original building?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by the original? Do you mean
Well,
the original climbing gym building, or do you mean the original?
The building that, with the gable that runs, north, yeah, east-west.
I'm not certain, but it's got to be relatively close to the same height, but no, there's no angle from any street where
It's gonna be,
a viewing angle you would never see it,
okay,
yeah.
that's what I'm getting at.
Yes,
You
yes,
don't-
that's.
You don't believe that it'll be visible
No.
from the street?
No, and in fact, we designed, my architect and I designed the structure so that we would really limit, I mean, the idea with the design of the addition was to produce a backdrop for the really cool mid-century architecture of the new chapel. And that's why it's such neutral colors, that's why it has to be a box in order to accommodate the type, because the reason it has no windows and things is the way that the climbing walls are constructed. They're constructed on the interior, exterior walls of the box, and then some down the middle to maximize the wall space that you have inside. And so because you can't really have windows anyway, it's a really nice way to have a backdrop to the limestone church that we want to be the feature of the property, you know. That's the thing that makes the site really special, I think. Yeah. Does that answer your questions?
It does.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay.
Barry, we have an answer to
Oh, yes, you
Jack's
have a
original
answer?
question.
Great.
So the Board of Zoning Appeals rules of procedure state that no petition denied by the board can be placed back on the docket within 6 months of the original disapproval, except with a unanimous vote of all members present at the board meeting. In all cases where there's a rehearing, the board may require the petitioner to demonstrate a material change in circumstances.
Okay. Thank you. Now we go to the public. Is anybody in the public who would like to comment? You'll have 5 minutes apiece, and if you could state your name, please, and then I'll swear you in.
I'm Elizabeth Cox-Ash, and I am one of the executive board members of McDowell Gardens, as is Jack. And this was presented, Joe came to us in September.
Excuse me 1 second. I have to interrupt you. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Joe came to us in September with the plans and let us know what was going on. And usually our membership is anywhere from 10 to 20 people, and we have over 400 residents who could attend. So there were not very many people there, but for all those who saw it, we were very excited about this. This is an excellent way of adaptive reuse. The church members are very much for this because it's family-oriented, it's child-oriented, so this would be an addition to the neighborhood, and it would not be a negative to the neighborhood. It also would kind of go along with the warehouse that's further south on Rogers Street, which is focused on youth and children. So McDowell has changed. I've been a resident since 1991, and the character of McDowell has changed from elderly to now we're having babies, and now there are children. So this would be a very positive addition to McDowell. And the church itself is pretty much the heart of McDowell. So this would be very good for all of us. I first met Joe, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when his house was in a BRI Mid-Century Modern tour. And he and his wife were quite gracious. I was a docent, and they showed us all the work that had been done on their house. And I really saw how careful he was about retaining historical character of that house. And so I really trust him that he would do the same for this church and keep the historic character. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If you could please state your name.
Mike Arnold.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have 5 minutes.
I'm not opposed to this at all. First of all, I'm the adjacent property owner on Dixie. But I had a couple of concerns I'd like to get a couple of answers for. The first one is the alley behind my house that runs east-west. People do use that even though it's unimproved. It's grass behind my house, but people do use it. And when they do, they typically angle off and drive through the church parking lot in order to get out. With that building there, it's going to be virtually impossible for people to make a 90-degree turn into the alley. So my concern is what's going to happen to that east-west alley if there's any consideration has been made for that. Second, my concern would be site lighting for the property, if they're going to have more extensive lighting or less extensive. I can tell you now with the church lighting as it is right now, there is light in my house 24 hours a day. So when you're walking at 2 o'clock in the morning in my house, it will put shadows in my house. So I'm concerned about additional lighting on the site.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer that it stay the same or less. My other concern would be if there's going to be any events held outside at this for this new use, and if so, would we be notified when that's going to happen? And then I would be curious about what the hours of operation are. I've not been able to go to any of the meetings, so I haven't heard what their hours of operation are, and I'd be curious to know what that is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Okay, hang on for 1 second. Hang on for 1 moment, please. Okay. Could you please state your name?
I'm Paul Ash, a neighbor.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Well, I won't need 5 minutes. I think my wife pretty well covered it. We're delighted with this. Is it going to be different? Sure. But it's McDowell. We're used to changes. And, will parking be an issue? Probably. But we had RCA for years, and so parking's always been, or has been an issue on and off. So I'm just delighted that the church is going to be saved, because the congregation is dwindling to the point where, we were going to lose this historic structure. Nobody was going to have the money to keep it up. Joe does, thank you. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead and approve this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Please state your name.
Lauren Wood.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm in the process of purchasing 2 properties in the McDowell Garden neighborhood on South Madison Street, and I, for one, am thrilled about the proposed development here at the church. I'm very familiar with the Hoosier Heights gym as it exists right now, and what it contributes to the neighborhood, and I think that the potential that it has to add to this neighborhood and into the core Bloomington neighborhoods is significant and exciting. And I think that it adds value to the properties that I'm currently purchasing and to the properties that exist there. Additionally, I think about what's going to happen with the hospital as that moves and that property changes. And I think that a reinvestment in old properties like this sets a positive tone towards that end, and it gives me a little bit of hope for how that property might develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Sure. The petitioner still has time left if you want to add or respond to anything you've heard at this point.
Thanks for the great questions, Mr. Arnold. I would say that our business hours are until 10 p.m. Every day of the week except Sundays, then we close at 9, and Saturdays we close at 9. Those would not change at this new site. There would be no...
Could you,
We can't hear
excuse
you.
me, could you address us?
Yes.
Don't respond to the public.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, we would not, we don't anticipate having any events that are exterior to the building. We don't do, big parties in the parking lot or things like that. I mean, everything that we do would be contained within the walls of the climbing gym. I would absolutely work to minimize, so at our Indianapolis facility, we have a huge parking lot, like, 200 cars that never fills, ever. And we always shut off all of our parking lot lights at 10 p.m. So we actually might, if there are lights currently that stay on at the church 24 hours a day, that would not be the case at our facility. And so hopefully I would be more than happy to work with the neighbors to reduce any kind of light pollution that currently exists at the site. And as far as alley access, I know that we've proposed that the new construction building would be 7 feet off the alley. And I'd be, again, more than happy to work with the neighbors to make sure that any landscaping we would do on that side could leave perhaps a gravel buffer or some sort of buffer that if people are pulling out of that east-west alley, they'd be able to, actually utilize the alley and, make it not too difficult for them to come in and out. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we also ask, does staff have any concerns, particularly about the alley configuration? Is that something you all took a look at in terms of turning radius? It sounds like there may be a solution anyway.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. I don't think that is necessarily something that we considered. Since there is still access to the 12-foot alley outside of being able to use this property, the access to what is currently the public space isn't changing, but
Sorry, but apparently there is, you can see on the map that there is an alley.
That dead ends.
yes.
That
Yeah,
essentially
so
dead
we
ends at this
we have not
site.
looked at that, but we are happy to work with the
Right.
petitioner to,
Okay, so I'm thinking we should probably just add that as a
Yep,
condition
sure.
to work together on that. Sorry. You need to come up here.
Thank you, sorry. So the east-west alley that's actually platted here on our site was vacated in the 1920s. I just didn't know if you were aware of that or not.
Thanks.
but- Okay.
Thank you. Okay, back to the board for discussion and a possible motion. I think we'd like some discussion.
Jack,
and
did you
some
want to say
issues.
something before we do anything more?
Yeah.
I also have some questions, some follow-up questions.
Yeah, I want to just explain why I have some reservation. On the whole, I find this an interesting project and I think helpful to the neighborhood. I see it as, on the whole, working to the betterment of the neighborhood, preserving what we have there in terms of the church buildings. I know their condition. I've been in them quite a lot. I'm a member of that McDowell Neighborhood Association, a longtime member, and I'm very well aware of everyone and everything in the neighborhood. And the one concern I have is, as I mentioned, this 9B, which shouldn't diminish the historic character of the property, and that's where I have the real concern. I went back to the minutes of Historic Commission, and I saw that there was some discussion there about materials. I don't know if there was so much discussion about design of the building itself, but there was certainly discussion of the materials and whether the materials should be made to match the materials on the building, namely limestone. And limestone and I believe cement panels and that sort of thing came up. It looks like it just sort of dropped and a couple of people talked about it, but no action was taken in saying that the building should have a match to the church. And that's my concern, is whether how much this building works with the existing church, works with the materials of the church to keep that historic character. And that's why I ask about if we did not pass it tonight, what would happen in terms of the petition, what could happen in terms of the petition. Could they come back fairly soon with changes that would allow us to go ahead and give a positive recommendation on this? So that's my concern, is whether we are actually doing any diminishing the historic character of the neighborhood, of the historic district, with the materials involved. As I understand it, and I want to ask this question, this building, as I understand it, is a metal building, is it not? This siding is metal siding and apparently in a color that's dark.
Yes.
And what I'm looking at in this rendering is a green wall with some sort of limestone-like panels. Are they limestone? Are they cement board? Do we know?
I believe they're planned to be limestone.
And what I'm wrestling with here is whether to give a yay or nay on this tonight, because is this going to be something that is going to diminish this historic character, or is it something that is, whether I care for it or not, is actually going to keep historic character by improving the property and using the existing facilities? I just want to state that's my quandary this evening, is which way to go on this. And I'm at the moment, I have to say I'm still undecided. With that, I'll leave it, and if I have any more comments, I'll come back in a moment.
I have just a few comments to follow up. Jack, I think this is an awesome reuse, really creative and fantastic. The building, the addition that's proposed, I guess my concern really is the west elevation, and right now that's pretty much unmitigated. That's what faces the neighborhood, and so my question for the staff is along the idea of the buffer. When we were talking about the landscape that's required, you said actually this area is not really required even. And could you explain why not? Because if we're considering this as, is it because it's RC now?
Yes. So
okay.
the
So technically,
right. So the way that the code works, the landscaping buffers are between zones. So because they're both RC, it wouldn't technically be required.
okay.
But the other development, like the 7-foot setback, for example, is more of a commercial setback that we sometimes have to make determinations to use other development standards for developments that don't strictly meet the general purpose of a zone. Sure. We kind of talked about that with the petitioner when they first came in and said, this was kind of the one thing that caught our attention at first. And he said they were more than willing, they were already planning basically to do landscaping along that area. Now, that landscape plan has not been formulated yet. Were this to be approved, I think that we would want to work with Linda Thompson, our environmental planner, on what could actually, live in this location and thrive to either, be able to grow up or densely, kind of to provide a little bit of a more human scale buffer for this building. I also think the drawing is a little, it's hard to see that the portion that it really is only this height, that if you were standing there, it's not the full 32 foot, that's actually, on the inside. I think that it's kind of hard to get a feeling for how it would actually feel there.
Mm-hmm.
Some other things we've discussed, would it be possible to do some sort of mural or something kind of more pedestrian friendly in this area? That might be possible. I don't think the petitioner would be opposed. I definitely know they're pro the landscaping. Other options we haven't discussed at length.
Okay. Well, I would say that, this is a 90-foot-long addition. It's 25 feet tall on the low end. We're talking about a predominantly one-story neighborhood, right? Where the church was really the prominent piece of the neighborhood that anchored, the neighborhood. So I think that the consideration of this edge is really important. And I know that it was discussed at the Historic Preservation Commission that perhaps they've got the element of the growth wall, the green wall on the north side. If that could also begin to shift onto the west side, there was discussion, but nothing that was formulated as part of a condition. I know I would feel really comfortable voting for this tonight if there is some way that we could build in some assurance that this would be looked at and that there would be some commitment if we have the ability to do an additional condition of approval, because it seems to be within our purview since we have these additional historic adaptive reuse standards by which we're granting and we have these findings. So it seems like there is a little bit of a door opening for us to maybe look at some of this more specifically without having to kick it all the way back on a COA level. That's what I kind of would hope for, especially if the petitioner is amenable. So kind of that's a little bit of my thinking. I don't know what the rest of you think.
I can certainly try to articulate something that would address that. I don't think it's likely to address Jack's concerns, but I think I could deal with a condition that would address the west-facing facade and/or landscaping. Yes.
Of the new building.
Yes.
Because I mean, just the way that the L-shape configuration of the existing church really lends itself well to tuck this large addition behind it. And I think that's going to be really successful from both the primary streets. But it's really from the neighborhood that I think it needs to be softened. And, typically when we have a historic building, our ordinance says you have to step down. There's a whole bunch of stuff that usually happens. And this is a little bit out of the ordinary. So I don't know, Joe, if you have any similar thoughts.
I don't have similar thoughts. I think, the alley it's an alley. That means the houses that abut against that are facing the opposite direction. There's probably, I don't see the properties in any pictures, but I'm assuming that there's some separation between the residential and the alley. I understand what the concern is about trying to add some green to it. I think that, I don't think that that's going to be much concern for the residents. And certainly if I lived there, I wouldn't have too much of a concern, just because it's the alley.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's my feeling. Like I said, I can't see though where the houses are,
Yeah.
whether it's,
Well, just.
is that it right there?
Yeah.
So you've got the two houses with an alley, so they're
Yes.
facing outward. So
They're facing north
So
and
what you
south.
have is essentially the only thing that's affected by that is none of the houses, because 203 or 503?
Up here.
503 is going to be
This is
right
the-
next to the parking lot that's going to be landscaped, and 510 on Allen Street is going to be next to the existing church building. So I don't think anyone's going to be facing up against it.
I don't argue that it's not, it's well disposed vis-à-vis those adjacent properties. I just think because this is a historic district, we really don't have a bunch of large metal buildings in this district, especially, certainly not new ones. I think we just need to take every opportunity we can to have this nestle in. Please.
All right, I'll put a motion on the table, and we'll see what happens. The motion
Sorry.
is for approval of CU-35-16 conditional use based on the findings in the staff report, with the following 5 conditions of approval, numbers 1, 2, and 3 as set forth in the staff report. Number 4, petitioner agrees to work with staff to try to ameliorate any negative effects on the neighborhood of the large west-facing facade of the new building through landscaping or other possible visual amenities. And number 5, petitioner also agrees to work with staff to try to preserve reasonable access to the east-west alley.
We need a second. I'll second that.
Okay? Now, I will say that I phrased this deliberately so that it doesn't mandate anything. It simply says petitioner and staff will work together and talk about this. And obviously, when staff talks to the petitioner, the staff will also be bringing in the adjacent neighbors and other people who might be affected. So it's designed to require a conversation.
Right, right. I would feel comfortable with that, considering that it's already gotten a COA. If we weren't, if we had, if we were on that board, I would feel different.
Right,
Right.
and that's coming from a different part of the conditions, of the requirements. It's actually, that's actually coming from number 3 in the requirements rather than number 9, which is
Right.
the one that Jack's concern is from.
Jack, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to ask those questions, and again, I said I was in a quandary about this because, yes, we have opinion from Historic Commission. We have an opinion from the neighborhood. Both are in favor. And with that, I don't want to start something here that's going to loop around and get us into something where we're chasing our tails, and after all this has been done. So I'm going to set aside my personal opinion and on the historic character and what this might do to it in the long term, and say that on the whole, I think this is a good use of the building in that it has been sitting for a while. It is likely to sit for a while without use. It's a hard sort of property to find some other use for other than a church, and that's not likely to happen. So when we have this project at hand, and it's a good project, I think the uses are not going to be detrimental to the neighborhood, and while I'm worried about the historic character in terms of the look, I'm going to set aside my personal opinions on this and support it.
And I just have one further point of clarification to the gentleman neighbor who asked about the lighting, and any new lighting would be required to meet our ordinance to be full cutoff so that it doesn't shine out. So I think that those kind of concerns will be more than addressed. Just wanted to get that in. Okay, any last
And that's code, right?
And that is code. That is code. And there will be full engineering drawings of this. I mean, there will be a landscape plan, there will be. Right, we'll see where the ADA parking
Survey, I think,
is.
took longer than expected, and so we just wanted to bring you what we had, knowing that they plan to fully meet the landscape plan after this.
And one other thing before we get, on the street, the neighboring streets, is that public parking? There's on-street parking there, right? It's not regulated?
I believe so.
One side, on each side, so there is an opportunity for overflow?
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
we're done with public input at this point.
I think she's just trying to answer that, yes,
Yes.
that.
I can,
We need you up
that's,
here if you're
yeah,
going to say anything.
please come back to the podium. And state your name again, please.
Elizabeth Cox Ash.
Thank you.
Anyone can park along the street. It's not designated, so overflow parking can be on the neighborhood streets.
Okay, so it
Okay.
can be accommodated. Okay,
Right.
thank you, thank you. Okay, are we ready for a vote? Carmen, can you please call the roll?
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Clapper,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Hoffman,
Yes.
Petition passed. Congratulations. We are adjourned.